So the first thing I like to do is mix into a soft clipper. So I'm going to use Gold Clip. It's my favorite soft clip sound, and it really gets a hip hop sound. So this is, I forget the price on this, but they sent this to me and it works miracles. Let's load up Gold Clip. And what we're going to do is turn up the gold parameter. This adds a saturation to the sound. And then we're going to push the sound into the Gold Clip. Now you can hear that crunch. Now the only thing we need to preserve in this case is the dynamic range. It's hard to really teach dynamic range because you have to feel it, but on this beat you can feel it. There's a movement to it. And it's all about the kick hitting it loudly and then the snare timing. So if the snare is too loud, we lose that dynamic range. Okay, so let's pull this back a little bit. Because everybody tries to make everything loud, but they don't realize that takes away from the movement sometimes. So I've done it many times, making stuff too loud to where it takes away from the movement. Let's add Gold Clip. Now the thing we're listening for is, do we still get that falling into the snare side sound? Like right now it feels like we're falling into the snare. We kind of feel it, but it's a little lessened because there's less dynamic range between the kick and that snare. So there is a sacrifice here. If you guys want to be like technical about it, this says we're clipping 6 dB. So let's pull this back 3 dB. Since we're at +7, let's do 4. So we're still getting the knock out of the kick, but we're preserving that falling feeling. So a lot of, beginners or amateurs or even intermediate mixers and producers, they'll overly make stuff loud and it takes away from that dynamic and you don't really realize it because everything's just loud. Okay, so I like to start there because that gives me a range to start to work with. And now I'm just asking myself, what needs to change? Nothing really needs to change. Maybe we could turn up the sample a little bit. Let's look at the sample. And let's see which part of the sample we need to address, if anything. Is that an EQ? So I love Pro Q3 because down here it gives you what's called a collision feature. So it tells you where energy starts to build up. So I think we could enhance some of those tom drums at the bottom here. Now, instead of doing just a bold boost on this whole stereo image, what we're going to do is switch this to the side information so that that low frequency is going to hit on the left and the right. That seems like a mono sound, but let's boost this. So we're boosting the room reverb of that sample. What we could do is we can make this more complicated than what we need it to be, but I was going to say we could create stereo width in that area and then boost it on the side. Well, let's try it. Okay, so right now the sound is a mono sound, so boosting the side isn't really addressing the original sound. So what we're going to do is add iZotope Ozone's imager plugin, if I can find it. Can't spell today. Ozone 11 imager. Here we go. From here, we're going to widen that specific frequency from about, I forgot the zone it was in. From about here to here. So somewhere in here is where the zone was. What we're going to do is stereoize the sound. Okay, so we're going to turn this up, band number 2. So now we're going to add the mid information to the side. So now when I'm boosting on the sides, it's actually boosting the hit from the tom drum and not just the reverb. And now the beat feels a little more wide and it feels like it has depth on the side. So let's do it before and after. Here's before. This feels like straight up the line. Here's after. Feels like we're moving with the image instead of it just being stagnant. That's more of a detailed thing. Next, let's focus on the bass. Okay, so the bass, what people don't realize is that different compressors create different harmonics for the bass. So it's not just about turning the volume down, it's also about the harmonics. Let's add an 1176. Let's just do the Rev A to keep it simple. Fast release, fast attack will give it more harmonics. And also we're just pulling up the levels here. But we see if we turn the bass up too much, then we're losing that dynamic. So this is why I said loudness can be your enemy when you're mixing, because you start to forget about dynamic range. Let's turn the bass down. So now in the submix, I really only think we need width. I don't think we need to adjust anything. Let's add the width. Let's use an imager. Let's widen only the mid stuff, not the highs. This will let the track breathe a little bit. So here's mono. We can see how much of the track disappears. Here's widening it. Okay, so same thing can happen with too much width. We can create less dynamic. So now it just feels like everything's on the side. So we're just gonna pull that out a little bit. Let's do it before and after. All the plugins, here's before. And here's after. Here's after. Somehow my plugins got on here. I didn't realize they were there. All right, so let's do that again. I didn't realize some plugins were in this session, so let's turn that off. Now let's turn it back on. So when people say clarity, they're really talking about getting stuff out of the way. So let's use a multi-band compressor. And because we added so much information to the side, let's start removing some of the attention to the side. Let's use a multi-band. Let's put it on expert mode. And let's switch this to side mode. And somewhere around 200 to 400. It's a lot of stuff doing stuff in that area. So let's start pulling that energy back. Basically, we're just looking for where the instruments have their fundamental frequencies for the most part. So let's solo the side information. So it's a lot of information around 400, even 200. So let's make a band from 200 to 400 and let's start pulling back the threshold. So now we're turning that volume down. So we made stuff wide, and now we're just chiseling out the stuff that is a little too muddy on the wide, width on the sides. So here's before. Here's after. And now let's turn the chain off for the sub mix. Here's before. Here's after. So the mix got a little dark. Let's add an EQ and brighten it up. Now, some people swear by Spectre. Spectre can create harmonics to a sound. So this can fill out your beat a little bit more. You got to be careful not to overdo Spectre. And there's different modes. So I like boosting at 60 to 75 hertz. It's another area you guys can boost up. Now, because we're adding harmonics, this is adding more information to the track, not just shaping the tone. I'll exaggerate so we can hear. Hear that bottom of that kick. That's what that's boosting. I like 60 because it's hitting that bass. So that's a nice sound. Let's just pull it back to about half of that. I'm not afraid to boost in this area. Let's boost this 3 dB. So it is heavy-handed to boost like that, but that's my style. Do it before and after. Here's before. Here's after. So the last step here is this adding a limiter. I'm going to do this on the submix just so it's all on one thing for you guys, but I would also use the master chain to try out different mastering things. Let's use the Pro L2. Just turn up the level. So we're trying to keep this within 3 dB, the gain reduction here. Now, in my opinion, Ozone has the best, like, I don't know what the word for it is, but it makes everything feel like together and cohesive. Let's put this on mode 4, modern, and you can mess with the upward compression as well. It has a really nice soft clip sound. So let's pull back the first limiter a little bit so that we can push it through the second one too. So what we're measuring here is how loud it's becoming. We're measuring, do we still feel the kick hits and then we fall into the snare? So this is where you have to use like an abstract idea about dynamic range, is do we still feel the movement of the track? Because we made it loud, but we took away a lot of movement. So keep in mind, like that falling feeling is because our ears have built-in thresholds that kind of turn the volume down pretty quickly. So when things feel like they're falling, it's because they've gone below that threshold and our ear doesn't prioritize that sound. So it feels like we're literally just dropping the sound off. When you make everything louder, things go above that threshold and they don't go below that kind of ear threshold. So here's where we have to balance like how much dynamic range we're going to preserve. So to my ear, turning down that transient linking helped some of the movement because now we're creating a difference between the left and right.